I started school at the age of 49. I'm 56 now, and so I was 55 when I was hired. That's old. But when I was thinking back on what am I going to do when I grow up, um, I didn't have clear direction. I did know that what was really important to me was to be able to stand on my own 2 feet financially and feel secure and have a secure job. That to me, I knew was important for my mental health, for my mental well-being, because I had been relying on my husband's income for almost 35 years. So that was a scary place to be.
Hello, I'm Gretchen Baskerville, and I'm the author of The Life-Saving Divorce, Hope for People Leaving Destructive Relationships. And today we are going to talk about getting back into the workforce, because that can be really daunting if you haven't worked for decades. I just happened to see this woman's story pop up. She said her husband is filing for divorce. She's been a stay-at-home mom for her entire marriage. She worked fast food maybe 20 years ago, but now the pressure is on. She's going to have to support herself and the kids and find a new place to live. She never expected this. She never saw it coming, and she doesn't even know where to start. How do you start again when you have no work experience and you're over 40? All right, so I have two guests today who are going to be the perfect experts for this topic. I have John Roach, who is the CEO and co-founder of Whole Story. And Whole Story turns life experience, maybe you're volunteering, maybe your homeschooling experience, into saleable professional skills. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Gretchen. Good to be here.
And then I have Julianne Smith. She's a homeschool mother of 7 and blogger who found her dream job after having been out of the workforce for over 30 years. Welcome, Julianne.
So good to be here, Gretchen. Thanks.
All right, so let's get started. I'm going to pitch this to John. John is our expert. He is the master at figuring out how do you sell yourself when you don't feel like you can compete with those 25-year-olds who are out of college. Take it away, John.
Sure. Thanks, Gretchen. What we say that we do, and I think we actually do it at Whole Story, is that we're a technology platform. We provide insight into life experience to power better hiring. And we do that because, and we started doing that almost 5 years ago, because we came to recognize that in most job interview settings, there was a huge gap between what was being talked about in terms of what was on the resume and what hard skills or technical skills people had, and what actually mattered in terms of the outcomes for that hiring. So the reality is that what are sometimes called soft skills, which are character strengths, interpersonal skills, leadership traits, are actually as important, if not in many roles, more important than the presence of those technical skills. And further, the place that we get that we develop those soft skills is through our life experience, and especially our pivotal life experiences that we have. And there's a lot of research from multiple different psychological disciplines that demonstrates this to be true. But most of us know it to be true intuitively, right? This is character is developed through struggle, through adversity, through those pivotal life experiences that we have. But it almost never, in almost no company, do they have a good way at drawing those experiences out and connecting them to those professionally relevant soft skills that are so crucial to their jobs. And, regardless of what your past work history was like, are you someone who can adapt are you someone who can learn and be, find a spot that fits? So from a historical perspective, we're actually in a really good moment for people who may not have, 30 years worth of experience doing this same thing that makes it really easy to go out and search for open jobs doing that same thing, which is kind of the old model. We're actually at a really good time for those, adaptable people with the growth mindset and that desire and capability for lifelong learning to be coming into the workforce, even if they may not have a lot of relevant experience.
So what I hear you saying is that skills are not nearly as important as having good character, integrity, perseverance, reliability, passion, adaptability, the ability to overcome big setbacks and just keep working on the problem.
That's right. And I think that to not overstate the case, of course, if you want to be a pilot or a surgeon or an attorney or certain of these types of roles that require a specific credential or a specific training pathway, then, you can't sort of sidestep that piece of the puzzle. But for a lot of roles out there, what you just said is absolutely true. And I'll tell you that the employers are waking up to this fact that those soft skills and character strengths are really the foundation for what they want as their next generation of employees. There's a survey that LinkedIn does every year, and we've been tracking it for the last 4 years. And they ask employers and hiring managers a number of questions related to soft skills related subjects. But the sort of the flagship question in that survey is, do you believe that that soft skills are as important or more important than technical skills for new hires? And if you go back 4 years ago, that number who said yes to that question was in the high 70s, low 80%. Now it's over 90%. Wow. And this is on the scale of 10,000 employers and hiring managers who take this LinkedIn survey. So it's a big cross section across all different industries. And so, it's heartening to know that employers are waking up to this reality and starting to make shifts in how they hire in order to address what they know is this critical need.
I'm really curious, Julianne, when you faced the employment world, what were you thinking? What were the concerns and fears that you had?
Well, it was scary. I hadn't been in the workforce since I was 21. It was the day my last day was the day that I had my first daughter. And so she's almost 34. And so, things have changed in the workforce. And I didn't have a degree. So, when I came to terms with the fact that my marriage was dissolving and I needed a way to support myself, it was a scary idea to try to tap into, what was I doing back in 1986? And did I have any relevant skills to bring to the table? So that was really scary thought.
Well, and then, all of us, I'm going to speak as a generalization for women, we have a lot of insecurities, and especially if we haven't been in the workforce for a while.
And I also had a different thing that was kind of over my head, which was my blog, and I'm a little bit visible on the internet. So that was a little bit scary to me, but just all of the above was just really scary. And, it made me think, what can I bring to this table? I'm a mom of 7. I've been homeschooling for years. When a kid has an accident, I know how to stop, shift gears, and go the other direction and figure out, how to handle that particular crisis, and then, manage to figure out what to do with the other ones while that crisis is going on, and then somehow manage to feed them. How do we do this? I don't know, but, we women are pretty darn resilient. So, we just find ways to do things. The difficulty that I found is that when we are in a difficult situation and we feel like everything is closing in, that's when we isolate, we start the negative self-talk, and we don't think that we have what it will take to get us over that hurdle. But we do, because there are so many women who have done it before us. And so that's what I want to provide to this audience here. Hope for women.
Right. You can do this, but you have to switch, as you said, that mindset. Yes. You've got to have a learning mindset, as John said, a growth mindset. I love the TED Talk by Carol Dweck.
Yeah.
The mindset of not yet. Okay, I messed this up. I don't have it mastered yet. I don't understand this yet. I don't know how to work this software yet. I don't know the systems and procedures in this job yet, but I'm working on it. So
let me just tag on to that. I have a friend who I unloaded a lot of stuff to during this crazy time of my life. And I actually give him credit for this, for helping me move on in a forward direction, because he said to me, Julianne, in 4 years, you can have your degree, or 4 years, you can be right where you are. What do you want? And he said that enough times to me that made me realize, dude, what am I doing here? Am I just going to continue this place where I am, where that's leading to nowhere? Or am I going to take some action and put my right foot in front of my left foot and start moving? And that really resonated with me, and it kind of kicked me in the rear end. So I think sometimes we need that kind of kick in the rear end to say, come on, you get up and go. You can do this.
Would you say that was the first step you took? You started getting your degree?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. And it was very scary. And there were moments where I cried. I cried in my professor's office. I cried in my academic advisor's office. I cried to my friends.
Well, and you were probably the oldest person in most of your classes.
Always. Yeah. And I the first day of class, I had 2 monitors in front of me, and I had to raise my hand and ask the instructor how to get the cursor from this monitor to this monitor. And I was doing a cybersecurity degree.
You're still working on that trick, Julie.
I know, just to get the video. I mean, it is whatever.
Julianne, the steps that you went through, and then eventually you and John here connected. And so bring us up to that point and how he opened your mind about entering the workforce again.
Okay, well, this is really exciting. So after I got my degree, I tried looking for jobs. Eventually, somebody, a kind of headhunter group, decided that this project management position would be up my alley. And I was thinking, project management? I don't know about that. So, but anyway, yeah, go ahead, send in the resume. And so they did that work for me. And I was interviewed, and John was my soon-to-be boss. And, so during that process, the interview process, he asked, a lot of questions, but what was really neat was, he said, it sounds like you've been through a lot of adversity. How would you handle a situation like this? And I didn't have a lot of answers in a business context, but I did have answers related to how I managed my home, how I finagled homeschooling with 7 children, or how I did different things on my blog. So with each question that he asked, I would respond, well, I don't recall having experience like that on my former business job, but I can give you a parallel with my life as I know it in the last 30 years, and I would provide an example. So what I was doing was saying, I don't have any experience. No, that wasn't true. It's just a little bit different. It's going through a different lens. And so what I was doing is I was saying, yeah, I can do this, but it may not look like what you thought it should look like, but it actually is kind of the same focus and the same drive. And I can do that. I know I can take that same skill that I used with my children in homeschooling, in preparing for a 7-day vacation and all of that preparation and all of those fine details, and I could apply it in the job. So yeah, that's kind of what I did.
I love how you did that. I was a hiring manager for over 25 years. And one of the things when I would teach single moms in my divorce recovery groups or single moms groups at church was when a hiring manager asks you a question about some kind of experience you've got, have you ever filled out a form ABC 123? You can say, no, I've never filled out that particular form, but I have done this, and this. And these women would look at me and say, are you telling me to lie? I say, no, what I'm doing is telling you to bring in relevant experience that shows that you're capable of filling in forms and that you have attention to detail. Right. So what do you think about that, John?
Yeah, I think what you just talked about, gaining proficiency in your interview practice, as you look to start applying for jobs or re-enter the workforce, gaining that proficiency in how to translate your transferable skills and actually speak those things out loud is huge. It's a big part of what we coach people in our workforce development classes on how to tell your story in a job interview. And I think that, Julianne did a good job of that. I should clarify, when I hired Julianne, it was while I was still in my previous role as the director of the cybersecurity organization that Julianne is still a part of. I have since about 6 weeks ago, I quit that job to go full-time as the CEO of Whole Story, which I had been working part-time on for 4 years alongside my co-founders who had been full-time the whole time. So finally a trio of people working all day together on it, which is great. I want to say too, though, that, Julianne was a unique candidate. I'm probably more attuned than a lot of hiring managers to the diamond in the rough opportunities that sometimes come with non-traditional candidates, but I'm certainly not alone, right? I'm certainly not the only person who sees things this way and is looking for those opportunities. And Julianne, but when I see a resume like Julianne's, which is definitely non-traditional, I'm someone for whom my curiosity is piqued more so than someone who responds with, well, they don't fit the mold, so let's pop them out of the equation. And Julianne was. I don't know if she had practiced. Maybe you had practiced. I don't know. But the capacity to speak to those transferable skills. And I'm also a child of. I'm one of 7. So I'm. And my mom is also. She helped start a Christian school in Pasco, and so I had a little bit of context maybe for what it meant for someone like Julianne to raise 7 kids and then go back to school. And so it beyond just that curiosity that I felt, it was also, a sense of sort of admiration. Like I know what this means at some level. So I also, have been a big believer for a long time in the relevance specifically of the motherhood and homemaker skill set as it relates to project management. Was a project manager for years. I'm certified as a PMP, so I have that's sort of the top level certification you can get as a project manager. And I've always felt that moms are like natural, well, maybe they're not natural project managers, they become project managers whether they want to be or not, right? And it turns out that's not an insight that is unique to me. There are actually organizations out there that are helping moms who are transitioning into the workforce or back into the workforce at sort of formalizing that relationship, recognizing it as a really strong project management foundation. So I kind of have that eye towards seeing, moms, homemakers as almost predisposed to be good at certain things in that way. And that helped Julianne as well. So
now you've had a lot of different experiences, John, and I think you had some case studies that you wanted to share with us, probably putting you on the spot. But Julianne's not the first one you've seen. Give us some examples of what you've done in the past.
Well, sure. I think that, so whole story, I mean, people should understand that the breadth and range of the types of stories that people tell on our platform is really broad. So it's not just about, mothers reentering the workforce. It's about the entire breadth of human experience, the pivotal life experiences that transform us, change us, and catalyze the growth of those soft skills, that then those origin stories become the evidence of, right? This is, I'm telling you that I'm this. I'm telling you that I have, a strong work ethic and I'm honest and I'm resilient and I'm perseverant and I'm courageous and I'm these different things. And that because I'm also telling you about how I came to know myself in that way or how I developed it. And so that also really has a humanizing effect during the interview too, by the way, I mean, as a sort of side benefit. But so, we do have had several stories shared on our platform that I think are quite powerful, that really take the specific, what we call the topic of divorce, and frame it in a way that is that illuminates the type of growth and awareness that going through that extremely difficult process catalyzed and instilled in that person. And so I don't have the story called up right here. I could probably find it, Gretchen. So I'm being perhaps a bit more general than you would hoped right now, but
No worries.
I think that to understand that there's regardless of the specific details of people's stories, there's a universality that exists when we move through struggle, and we may not embrace it, but we don't turn away from it, and we step through it. And that is what, I mean, it's scriptural, right? If you're coming at this from a Christian perspective or other world religious traditions, actually, this is sort of a universal human truth, that we're just operationalizing to be deployed inside the context of the hiring conversation. But that divorce, or even, deciding to go back to school post 50. I want to just highlight that for a moment. Like, if Julianne were to go through our platform and choose her 3 to 5 stories, whichever ones that she might want to tell, that decision, and then the adventure of going back to school when she did, in a discipline that she knew nothing about, and graduating, that in and of itself is so rich with the type of human material that hiring managers want to understand about people, but oftentimes don't know how to get at, So, yeah, I think there are, anyone who goes through the app itself, there's about a dozen examples that are introduced through that process, so people can see the different kinds of stories. And then there are some on our website as well. So
you're not talking just take over the whole conversation and tell your sob story. You're talking about strategically picking some stories from your past, from your experience, that demonstrate your resilience or your perseverance or your integrity or your character in other ways. Julianne, I see you nodding. Tell us a little bit about what you've learned from doing that.
Well, what I did, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it too. I remember when I was in class, the topic in cybersecurity, we deal with vulnerabilities. And in my blogging world, I deal with vulnerabilities in the church, where the church, left vulnerabilities that caused people harm. So I became an expert in church vulnerabilities, and while at the same time I was studying about cyber vulnerabilities. And so during the interview process, I decided to bring my blog to the table and say, I have been working with vulnerabilities for a long time. It's part of my mindset. And everywhere I go, I see vulnerabilities, and I'm looking about how do I correct that situation? How do I fill that hole or provide more security there? And so I think what I did was I kept that conversation relevant to my future job and helped explain that, even though I haven't been doing cybersecurity all these years, my mind is geared towards safe practices. And this is what I think about all the time. And I've been thinking about since 2012 when I started my blogging world. So I think that was helpful. It helped sell my story, if you will. It showed that I was really being thoughtful and trying to translate what I had been doing to what I hope to do in my new job. And yeah, so I think that's what it's really important for women to do, is look at what they've been doing. And you don't have to have a blog to do this. You may have volunteer work. You may be part of a homeschool co-op, or you may, find something that you do and see where you can find those parallels and then make it come to life. You don't have to apologize for doing your homemaking skills. This is nothing to be ashamed about. You've got real life skills that are transferable, and put it on the table and be proud of them, because you do use them. I use those same skills in my project management now. And I'm sure, go ahead.
So the woman here who says, I've been a homeschool mom my entire marriage, I last worked 20 years ago, where would you start with her? And then I'm going to, when you've given us some ideas, I'm going to switch over to John and ask the same question.
Okay, so for a homeschool mom, you've got to think ahead. You've got to plan a schedule for your students. You've got to match curricula with not only your style of teaching, but also with your child's style of learning. So you're being in tune with your children. These are skills that you can put on the job as well. So just maybe take a piece of paper and a pen and start writing everything that you do as a homeschool mom. You have to have a schedule for each day. You have to have follow-up. You have to engage conflict with your children. Your coworkers are not going to be children, but you are going to have conflict on the job. And so you're going to have good communication skills and conflict resolution skills. Just gear up that vocabulary a little bit so it doesn't sound so, I had to take care of my kids fighting, just change it and make it sound relevant to the work environment.
So I think, and this is where John really comes to the forefront and whole story. He helps train women or just anyone to how do you take something like, I can turn on a dime if there's an emergency. I can search for and find and adapt curriculum just right for my children that work with our home. John, how does Whole Story help them think through these skills and then translate them into something that works in the professional workforce?
Sure. So I'll just answer an earlier question real quick, because I think it was an important one, which was around which stories to tell. And so again, this is part of our training that we provide people in workforce development settings, but that is such an important insight, Gretchen, and one that's worth thinking about up front, that this isn't about sharing raw or unprocessed stories that you still feel super vulnerable around. Like, some vulnerability is important and powerful and leads to authenticity and humanizes the process. But if it's a story that, or a topic that you don't know that you'd be able to get through a conversation with someone about without crying, that's probably not a good story. Not that there's anything wrong with tears. Julianne's been in tears in my office before, for sure, and it was all good. But
John, it was after
but not in the interview, right? Not in the interview. But I'll tell you, Gretchen, now to move to your most recent question, that's exactly what the app process, the onboarding process does for people. So I call it structured storytelling. I think that's a great term, but neither of my co-founders likes it that much. So it's not in any of our marketing materials, but I still use it. It's a structured storytelling process, and it elicits, it draws out of people. You go through a sort of a self-assessment related to how you've grown in these 13 soft skill areas that we address. And then there's a sort of a prompting process and a question and answer based approach that then yields these short, like 3-tweet length stories that begin with what we call the statement of strength. It's kind of what you just said, Gretchen. I know how to do this thing. And then the rest of the story is sort of substantiating that. So we really, we've spent a couple of years working with ourselves and many affinity groups, people from different, underrepresented backgrounds, several fancy psychologists to help take what was originally a pretty cumbersome approach to doing this and making it really easy. So, people can typically get to their first story within 15 or 20 minutes. And then we really encourage folks to build 3 to 5 stories, because as you know, you want to deploy these in the interview in a way that connects to what the interviewer is talking to you about. And so you're not just laying this on them. They may ask you, well, tell me a story about a time that you had a contentious relationship with a coworker, and how did you resolve it? Very common behavioral interview question they're called. And you might say, well, I am excited to tell you about that last time. I just want to share with you first how I came to be so calm under pressure and in contentious situations in the first place. I grew up in a household that was really conflict driven. I mean, my parents were divorced, or my whatever the context was, and I had to learn how to stay really centered and calm in those situations and to ease the tensions of the people around me in these different ways. And it was tough, and I'm through it now, but I'll tell you, that background has really made it just easy for me to deal with those situations in the job setting. Like I don't get flapped by, people who have some tension with one another. And I'm able to often be the one who steps in and can be that mitigating voice. And then you can tell a specific story if you want. So developing that fluency with how to naturally introduce these types of stories in the context of an interview is a big part of it. It's not, so if you go through our app and at the end of it, you have, these 3 to 5 stories that you're going to make arrows in your quiver for the interview, that's step 1. Step 2 is developing the fluency to be able to actually introduce them in that setting verbally, right? So encourage a lot of practice with that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, this is great, because I think what people are looking for is exactly what you're talking about. You mentioned that there was a list of different kinds of traits that you want to find stories that match to, and that you're going to ask a lot of questions to help uncover those stories.
Right.
And I think that's because if you put a person in a room and say, give me a story about your persistence, they may not be able to come up with anything. But if you ask them some pointed questions, like what's the toughest thing you've been through that you finally were victorious over, but for a while you wondered if you'd ever be able to conquer it.
Gretchen,
yes, ma'am.
Can I just say that you just hit on something that is so critical to this whole set of topics, which is that most of us are not encouraged to do the things that we need to do in order to develop what's called a narrative identity, that capacity to connect who we are and our strengths as individuals and human beings with what it took to get us there. We don't have that muscle. And the way that we develop that muscle typically is through therapy, through going through the 12 steps, through massive trauma that then we figure out a way to recover from. It's when we're living our daily lives where we're mostly comfortable and we mostly have food on the table and the things that we need every day, there's no catalyst for us to consciously make that connection between the mind and the heart and understand where those relationships came from. And so when you go through the whole story process, what people often report is that, they go through it the first time and build their first story, and it's hard. It's like they're developing that muscle. But then not only does it get easier to build subsequent stories, but it also triggers that process. It is, we don't purport to be a therapy app or a therapeutic in any way. That's not what, we don't make those claims, but people describe it that way to us all the time, that it feels like therapy because they're actually making those connections that in many cases they've never made before ever. So how would they be able to tell that story?
Right. Julianne, how did you do that?
So I just wanted to piggyback on both of your thoughts here. As I was listening to John, and as John already said, that he is more in tune, and he is able to look beyond the the normal interview process and find those soft skills, because that's who he is. However, a lot of interviewers are not like John and don't have that. So it's kind of up to us. We need to be in that driver's seat when we're being interviewed, and we need to kind of take over that interview as we are asking those questions. So yeah, while we're going to answer that question, we also might take a little diversion and share a little bit more of our story that we've already rehearsed, and that we can bring relevance and understanding and give a little bit more backbone to why we say we can do this particular thing. And I think what it does is it invites that employer, whoever's interviewing us, to listen beyond what they had originally anticipated and have a different perspective on that area. I think it gives a more full picture and greater insight into who we are and our character. So, what John is talking about, getting in touch with our stories and, articulating them in 3 to 5 of them, rehearsing them, knowing them, making sure that they're part of who we are and we can just really tell it, I think is so important in that interview process. We are in the driver's seat.
What we say, you made the point, as well as my partner Aaron, who says it all the time, and it's in our training material. You have to be the expert on you.
Yeah.
It's almost a certainty that interviewer is not an expert. Most hiring managers are not expert interviewers. Most of them have had no training whatsoever. They're just copying whatever they saw the first time that they, started as a manager, and they've been doing it the same way ever since. And so that empowering yourself and being ready to speak to the truth of who you are in a professionally relevant way, not expecting or relying on that hiring manager to draw that out of you, being ready to offer it up.
Right. Because they're going to come out and they'll ask all the cookie cutter questions. Tell me about your last job. Why aren't you there now? What kind of job are you looking for? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Boy, you sure don't seem to have much work experience. So what do you do from there, Julianne?
Again, you're putting your very best on the table. Only you know your story, and you are providing them an insight into who you are, what your character is, what your ambitions are. You're selling yourself. And so, part of this is, having an understanding of where you've been and where you've come from, what you've succeeded in. But it's also just to be able to really present that in a way that's appealing and desirable for that employer. Show them something that they really want to have part of their team, and that's super relevant. And, I got to have you because you have something that I've never seen before, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is really just, again, knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, knowing how to translate those things that we did outside of the job, but make it relevant to the job. And it's a lot of positive self-talk. I know some circles, they may not look so highly on that, but, it is important, because what I have found is that a lot of women who are kind of stuck, we do a lot of negative self-talk. I can't do this. I don't have that experience. I don't have the qualifications. So what I'm saying is, no, remove that and start saying, well, yeah, I do. It just hasn't been in that same environment. So start building yourself up and acknowledge the skills and the gifts that you already have. You don't realize you do, but get out your piece of paper and pen and start writing them down. And, maybe this is a weeks long process of just, you're doing the dishes. Oh, yeah, that's a skill. I need to go write that down. Tackle this kind of stuff in a business-like way. be serious about this. Go and write those things down. Give yourself the time to really do some self-reflection and look at all those things you're doing during the day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. What am I doing that I can also do on the job? We just don't think of it that way. And that's what women need to start doing, just to get out of that negative rut, I think.
It's so interesting because a lot of women are coming out of abusive situations where their reputation has been smeared, where they've been told that they're not intelligent, that they haven't got anything meaningful to say, that they have nothing to contribute to the conversation, that their voice is unimportant. Could they maybe ask other women friends, what do you see as being my greatest skills? I mean, where do they start? If they've been undermined for so long, they're not even really sure that they even have any skills.
I'm a huge proponent of women reaching out and helping other women. I have private groups. You do as well. So what I find is that women are the best cheerleaders for other women. And, since I'm working full time, I don't even have the time to moderate some of my groups, but I tell you what, there's no need to, because they moderate by themselves. These women who have gone through and succeeded, they want to help other women. And we are powerful when we are a group together, and we are so encouraging for each other. We know what it's like to be on one side and then be on the other side. And we want to help alleviate some of that crazy ideas, the negative self-talk, the things that people keep on telling us over and over again. When we've been in an abusive marriage, when we've heard those negative comments towards us, it is depersonalizing. And so we need to be built up, and our brains need to be calibrated. We need to get those new messages of affirmation, and we need to tell ourselves the truth. That's the reality. Is we bought into a bunch of lies that were told to us, and those lies need to be gone. And so the only way to redo that is to tell ourselves the truth and other women can help in that process.
One of the lies we get told is that work outside the home is not meaningful. It won't bring you anything good, except for a paycheck. You won't develop self-esteem. You won't be loved by your coworkers. You won't enjoy working for your boss. We've been told for so long that the only righteous or gold standard Christian way of being a woman is to be a wife and a mother and stay at home. What is your answer? How has the workforce been for you?
Well, it's been great. I love working where I do. I have a wonderful team, so respectful. They've come alongside me. They know I don't have any other experience, in project management, and they just really come alongside, give me suggestions. It's been fantastic. John did hire a lot of those. So he knew he created a really good team there. But the idea that women need to stay home, and a bunch of the teachings that you and I were surrounded with in some Christian circles. Here's the deal. I was not in a healthy place in my marriage. And sadly, I went through a divorce. I am the healthiest I've been in decades. And the proof is that people who have known me my whole life say, I look completely different. My eyes look completely different. I'm thriving physically, emotionally, spiritually. I needed to get away into a safe place. And the process that, the journey that I took, yes, it was difficult. Yes, I was scared. Yes, I cried. But look at me now. This is awesome. This is fantastic. So I have to say, when I when John sent me the something about his company, and I was thinking, oh, this is what women need. Gretchen, can we do this? Can we do a video like this to really help women out? And that is my heart's desire. I have been through the muck. I get it. And I just want women to be able to know that they can succeed. I am not any more brilliant than any other person. I had to work really hard. But that's what we women are good at. We know how to work hard. We know how to stay focused. If we are surrounded by a group of women who can push us and keep encouraging us, the sky's the limit. And we can thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like about your program, John, you actually take them step by step. So they don't have to come already knowing what all their skills are. You're going to elicit it from them through questions. You're going to give them case studies. You're going to let them see other people's stories, and so they can get ideas and be inspired. What kinds of things do you do for them, John, to get them going?
Well, I mean, there's a the process itself is it's self-contained, so it's all sort of baked in to the software platform as you go through it. I really like what Julianne is talking about with writing down these skills, because and thinking about it in a business sense, like, okay, I'm orienting towards creating the opportunity for economic independence. And that's what, a job can do. It's there's something very spiritual about that, actually, to me, because for people who are, yoked in a way that is really unhealthy, it's very difficult for anything else to go right. And money is not the end all be all, but enough money to create the conditions so that economic independence can happen can be a precursor to wholeness. And I've seen it a lot, right? And so I think that depending on where, people are in their journey on towards that commitment, that mindset that Julianne is alluding to, shifting into that mindset of I am thinking about what I'm good at. I'm thinking about what I'm capable of. I'm thinking about that begins the process of building the muscle that I was talking about earlier. And so in some ways, that's all to say that the power of going through the whole story process to some degree is influenced by the mindset and the degree of intentionality that you bring to it, right? If for people who are just checking a box because they're in one of the workforce development programs that use it, and people could go through it and check the box and not really get much out of it. But by bringing the mindset to it that says this is an important step on my process to the possibility maybe of economic independence and freedom, just being there as you start it, I think, significantly increases the likelihood that as you go through it, that you will find those nuggets. That you went in there thinking that you only had 5 skills, and it turns out, wow, you can actually really see that you have easily 8 or 9 of these, and you've got the stories and the lived experience to prove it. Yep. So.
Well, I'm just excited at the process because it happened with me. I remember sitting in cybersecurity classes going, how in the heck am I going to, how is this going to work? And then slowly but surely, I started making those personal connections. And I did have a really good professor who talked to us frequently about how to make your life relevant, which is kind of interesting then to also meet John later on. but he kind of helped that mindset. And so I kept doing that throughout my college experience, and just trying to figure out, how am I going to sell this? How am I going to bring this to the table? And so, this is a thought process. It takes time, and it takes a lot of thinking outside the box. And, each thing that you write down, when you write down the things that you're doing today, I wasn't really saying, what are you good at? What I really was wanting to say is, what do you do each day as you go throughout your day? And then how can you apply that? So it's not a matter of, all of these are gifts. No, these are procedures that you do as a mom, as a homeschool mom. Those procedures, think of them in a business sense, just tweak them a little bit. So, it's not all about, oh, I'm so gifted in this and gifted in that. No, you're experienced in this. I'm skilled in this. I have practiced this inside and out. And so that's what I'm talking about. And we are so used to them, we don't even think about them. So that's what I'm saying. Identify these things, these practices that you do each day, and make a list. And it may be that you don't even know what area you want to get into. That's okay. But still, you have them written down. And eventually when something happens and you go, oh, maybe that's an interesting field I can get into, then take that list and see how you can tweak it for that particular area that you may want to go into. So,
well, I'm bringing up something similar to that. I have a friend who was part of a church that was really strong on door-to-door evangelism. And John and I were talking about this last week, and he says, that is the most incredible sales training you could possibly get. Because if you're used to overcoming rejection and just carrying on, and that shows your character as well. Yeah. And boy, a lot of companies can use something like that. Let me ask you about a situation I often see. A person who wants to go back in the workforce, but they say, the only job I want is this one. So what do you do with people who say, there's really only one thing I have a deep passion for? John, what do you do with that?
Well, I always encourage people to follow their passion, but not at the expense of their basic needs and their basic mental health. And that economic independence and economic stability is a huge contributor to, and in many cases, precursor to that mental health and those basic needs. And so, I think that there's someone who feels really drawn to a particular type of work. Maybe they don't have the educational background. Maybe there's a hard and fast requirement. They have to go back to school. And if that's a motivator for them to go back to school, to say, that's what I want to do, and I'm going to go get this 4-year degree to get it, then I think that can be a real positive. If though, it's what I think can occur in the situation that you described is that people are using that their asserted connection to or passion for that role as a way to actually avoid doing what really needs to be done to return themselves to the workforce. Because, well, there's no jobs like that out there. I check Indeed every day and there's nothing in, there. All I want to be is an Amazon customer service associate, and they're not hiring right now. So I'm not going to look at any of these other opportunities that are out there. So I think it's it's a bit of a complex question, in that there are maybe some scenarios where it comes up where it could be seen as a positive, and others where it's really not a positive. And so I would need to sort of assess it on a situational basis before I would make recommendations to that person, or try to maybe gently course correct them back to thinking, look, you haven't had a job in the professional realm in 15 years. And I know that this is what you're drawn to. Maybe you aren't ready for that. You need, to do something for 1 or 2 years that may not be that glamorous in order to prepare you for that role. But set it out as a progression and as a series of goals, and not just, I'm going to jump all the way over there to the end,
Yeah, that's a real good point.
Gretchen, I wanted to mention, so I started school at the age of 49. So let me see, I'm 56 now, and I was 55 when I was hired. That's old in the business world. But, when I was thinking back on what am I going to do when I grow up, I didn't have clear direction. I did know that what was really important to me was to be able to stand on my own 2 feet financially and feel secure and have have a secure job. That, to me, I knew was important for my mental health, for my mental well-being, because I had been relying on my husband's income for almost 35 years. So that was a scary place to be. So what I did was I looked all over and I tried to figure out jobs where age wouldn't be so much of a big deal, because the age can be a big deal in some areas. But the reason I selected cyber, and this is not a sell cyber show, but was because I knew that there was always going to be a need for people in cybersecurity. So that gave me a little bit more assurance that, yeah, I could go this route and it would provide some stability, for the long haul. And did it interest me? Not really. Did I grow to be interested?
You didn't tell me that in the interview.
Well, it interested. Well, it didn't at first. No, I mean, because first of all, I was a Mac girl. I didn't like PCs, and they scared me. But I think what happened is I realized, you know what? I have a brain just like everybody else. I can engage my brain and try to learn this new skill and apply it, and I can learn to love it just like I can. And I actually did learn to love it. I love it. It's a great field. So I would tell women to don't sell yourself short on only staying focused on one thing that you think that you could do. It might be more important for you to get your feet on solid ground financially, get stable there, and then the world opens up for you. You can have more options and maybe a shift in careers, or you go back to school or whatever. But when you don't have that financial safety net, again, it puts you in that position of being so vulnerable, and that's a scary place to be for women. At least it was for me, and I know it is for a lot of women I work with. We want to make sure that we have food on the table for ourselves and for our children. So this worked for me. So that's just one way of doing it. I looked up jobs that could be attained by, only an associate's degree. Dental hygienist is one that you could do in 2 years. I can't remember what else. Oh, sonographer, ultrasounds was another one that you could do in 2 years. So those are, I think, I don't know if there's such an age requirement on those, but, I tried to look and see what could be available for me. And I originally was going to do only associates. And then as I just looked further, I realized, you know what? A bachelor's is going to really do me well, I think. And I'm glad that I went the 4 years.
Well, what it sounds like to me is you just, the whole concept of just getting your feet moving.
Yes.
God can't steer, a car that's not turned on and not in drive, start moving,
start moving.
Steps.
Absolutely.
Start looking
have a bias toward action. That's what we always say. Like because that inertia is the biggest enemy in these kinds of moments. And, if you make a mistake in the sense that where you put your first 6 months worth of energy towards reimagining your professional identity, and you realize, you know what, actually, I've been coming to this school, going to these classes that I thought sounded interesting, but I've been walking past this poster every day that was something that seems so much more interesting, and I'm going to actually pivot and move in that direction. Guess what? You never would have made it into that other direction had you not taken those steps that walked you past that poster in the first place. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
That's all the time. And that's how people find their passions. It's oftentimes not what they think their passion is in the first place, at least in the realm of professional, it's like how often does the way that people pay the bills overlap with their true vocation? Not very often. I mean, it happens. It definitely happens. Yeah. But the world is full of fulfilled, balanced, spiritually whole people who aren't paying the bills by doing the thing that they love the most. And that's okay. It's really okay.
It is.
Absolutely.
I just remember being in school and, like my friend said, 4 years, what's going to happen in 4 years? It's either you have a degree or not. And during that process, I remember getting through one day and then another day. It was like, I kept getting encouragement from my friends, but those are 2 days that you don't ever have to repeat again. And that's 2 days closer to your, you're just moving forward, you're moving forward. And that forward motion is just so important. I think initially it is that first step, and do it. You can do it. You can do it.
I love that. So John, where do we send people next? What's their next step? How many hours would they put into this? Give me an idea of a typical person.
So I think that, what often happens is that people will struggle through the first story. And we always tell people, you can edit it, you can change it, you can delete it. Don't get attached to it being perfect. We just encourage them to do a crappy, rough draft the first time, right? Because, but still people struggle because of those muscles that I was describing earlier. So they struggle and they get through their first one in about 20 minutes. And then if they're going to stick with it and try to get to 3, which we encourage, oftentimes they get to 3 by about 30 to 45 minutes. They get to 3, they're done.
Okay.
And then the next day, as that, all those muscles and those connections are being strengthened or reinvigorated, and there's a process that kicks off, and people oftentimes wake up the next morning and they're like, oh my gosh, like I have to go change my story. There's a key piece of that I didn't capture. Or they think, they say, wow, I just realized that this other thing that I never really thought of as a story, it's just part of my childhood or whatever, is actually really the key to understanding where my integrity came from. But I never would have, they don't get that right away when they sit down and do it. So there's this, I think it's like there's this 45 minutes to get to 3 stories, but then over the course of the next week, they might feel compelled to come back and edit and maybe add another story and another story. And the subsequent stories are a lot easier. And what we tell people is don't worry about the quality of the writing. Your primary purpose for doing this is not to create an artifact that you are submitting to an employer. It is to prepare you for the interview or for these kinds of professional conversations. So do not worry about your eloquence or, even spelling things right at first. Ultimately, you may want to do that. You may want to come back around, but it is absolutely contrary to the spirit of what you're trying to do in the beginning to think about this as a composition exercise. That's really not what it's intended to do. So just as a...
Yeah, I love what you said about you're going to write something and it's going to be a crappy first draft, and you'll sleep on it and you'll marinate on it. Maybe you'll think about it over the weekend. Maybe somebody will say something to you and you'll say, ah, that's something I want to add to this story, or that person really described it well. Those are the words I'm going to use. And I'll tell you, people on Facebook, in my private Facebook group, are wonderful at describing what has happened to them, and wonderful at thinking it through. And then everyone adds to their story or asks them more questions and clarifying it and getting more, clarity is just a good word, on what happened to them, and then turning it into a story that shows how they held their head high and just kept going through a tough time. And I think it's really, really important. Take a job, even though it's not at the level you wanted, because you just need to get your foot in the door. And there was a good friend of mine who I'd known for many years, 20, 30 years, who had struggled with major depression all of her life. And she had not worked outside the home. And I don't know what got into her, but she decided to take a job in a warehouse doing picking, packing, and shipping. And she actually was pretty good at it. And then the money started coming in, paycheck after paycheck after paycheck. So she was no longer, in her case, she was happily married. She was no longer asking her husband for money anymore. She was no longer, trying to justify her purchases for the grandkids. She had her own money, and having her own money gave her a sense of self-respect that she hadn't had before. So there's something wonderful about even taking that first step with that first entry-level job.
Yeah,
Gretchen, I was thinking about what you were saying about, when you start, well, actually, John as well, that this is your story. And as you may not like it the first couple times, and then you kind of fine tune it. And I think this is kind of like a therapeutic process as well, because, when we are stuck in that negativity of, oh, I don't think I'll ever be able to succeed or get this kind of job or that kind of job. When you start these stories and you articulate them in your mind, the next time you think it through, you've already gone up a level. So then you get to rethink it again, and with new insight and new applications. And then the next time you do it again, you're doing the same thing. So you're kind of bringing a level of self-awareness that you never had before. But what you're also doing is you're validating yourself. And this is all, I think, really so important in part of the process in reframing who we are and how we can present ourselves.
Julianne, you just hit on something that I believe to be absolutely central to the purpose of what we are doing at Whole Story, but it's also something that we can't yet make really very strong claims about. It's hard to measure, but I think in the future we will be able to, at least in the form of people self-reporting on the effects of going through this process. But that reframing that you talk about, and it ties to this psychology, this narrative psychology, and what happens when we make meaning out of the experiences of our lives and how they've caused us to develop as human beings. And when we have a solidified narrative identity, when that meaning making is robust and healthy, it changes who we are. It adds strength and confidence and power, in the healthy sense of power. And so, I think for many people who have gone through Whole Story, who have a lot of folks who come from underrepresented backgrounds of all kinds, and people who have had different types of trauma. We draw heavily from this discipline of psychology. It's called the study of post-traumatic growth. So it's baked into our app and what we do. So people are very familiar with post-traumatic stress.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, over the last 30 years, there's been now well over 1,000 studies that have been done around the world on this idea of post-traumatic growth, which, by the way, can sometimes coexist with post-traumatic stress. People can be experiencing both at the same time. And some people never get out of post-traumatic stress. They have post-traumatic stress disorder for years. But many people actually experience permanent post-traumatic growth that takes root inside these 13 skill areas that we look at on the app. So, again, my partners are always yelling at me for diving too deep into the research base but we get to talk about the research for like 5 seconds in our marketing material. But to me, it's so powerful and so fascinating because, again, it's this idea that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? And people say that, but what they don't realize is that there's decades now of deep psychological research that demonstrates not only that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, it also makes us more empathetic, more courageous, more resilient, all these things that really matter in a professional context. And it's actually measurable. So just the idea of post-traumatic growth, I think, can be empowering for people who may not have ever thought of their adverse experiences in that way.
Absolutely. And from a Christian background, we have verses in the Bible about beauty from ashes. We can have growth even though we've been through that kind of adversity. And another verse is talking about comforting each other with the comfort that we have received. When we were talking about women supporting each other. So, John is bringing up a psychological aspect, and some Christians may have some issues with psychology, but I'm telling you that the Bible verses are here that support the same narrative. And so we do have the skills, the tools that we need with community and women together to help each other. And the Bible is all about going through trials and difficulties and succeeding and making beauty from ashes. So I love what you're saying, John. I follow a lot of those same, teachings or whatever, because of my life experiences. And I can also apply it from a biblical Christian standpoint as well. And to me, we can move forward in health and healing and be whole.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because in the first white paper that we ever wrote about some of this emerging psychology of the last 30 years, we actually rooted it in the recognition that this is an understanding of how we become who we are as people that is deeply biblical, that has been well understood for 2,000 years in the context of it's sort of the way of the cross, right? From a Christian perspective, it's like, what do we do with our suffering, and how do we let it transform us? And so it's like the psychologists are just catching up and applying a modern language to something that has been well understood by the Christian wisdom tradition for thousands of years, frankly.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I love that. I'd like to end on that because that's so strong. Any parting thoughts?
Well, I'm just so encouraged to be able to be a part of this, to encourage women who have been in really difficult and challenging life circumstances, that you don't have to be stuck where you are. You could take this first step just like I did. And it's scary, but reach out to a group of women, search me online, find Gretchen online. We'll get you hooked up with women, and we can do this journey together. We really can, and you can be successful. You don't have to do this. You're not alone. And I think that was one of the scary things for me, is I thought I had to do it alone. I was never alone in this process. I had a team of cheerleaders. You were one of them, Gretchen, behind me. So anyway, I'm really encouraged to be a part of this interview and have John share his wisdom and helping you all just think a little bit differently on how you can use those gifts that you have that you may not realize that you have. So you go, girl.
Absolutely. You can thrive. John, parting shots here.
Well, thank you so much for the chance to have this conversation, Gretchen, and to bring me back together with Julianne, which I'm super grateful for. She's one of my all-time favorites, and this is really fun. And I would just say to folks, hearkening back to something that I said right at the beginning, there's, in many respects, there's no better time in history to be seeking to enter or re-enter the workforce, even if you don't have some classically well understood or articulated career progression. This is this is a moment full of opportunity. Even as all the chaos around us politically and everything else unfolds, we know that the workforce is in the midst of a historic disruption that creates space for people who have these soft skills and know how to help hiring managers understand that they have those soft skills. And you may not get the first job that you interview for. That's okay. I've been rejected from a bunch of interviews. I could tell you stories of people who have had to come back and back and back, and it was the 7th or the 8th job interview. That's okay. So set your expectations realistically. And Julianne is something of an outlier in that realm, I think. But she's an outlier in a lot of realms. And let this give you a little bit of hope, because there's a lot of hope out there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Thanks, Gretchen.